Nolan has a very specific style, and that's great, but it doesn't work for everything. And I think that's the biggest takeaway we can take from this film is that, again, it's a good film. He's a good director. And I think we've said it before on a really early podcast that he constantly produces good work, but it's not all equal. And that's partly because that's just, being a director, you don't always produce the same quality of same worth, but also like his style is just, he loves weird timey-wimey stuff. And like, okay, that's great, but maybe not for everything, buddy. Just, like I think we've also said it before. Like the most streamlined of his films is probably the Dark Knight trilogy, where it's like chronological for like the most part, but otherwise he always does like his special little twist, and most of the time that works well. But I think in this specific instance, it's not as powerful and as useful a tool in this type of telling of a historical drama for this type of what he's trying to do here.
Yeah. I agree. It just doesn't work, and that's okay. If you wanted... actually, this is really weird to think about. If you wanted the factual story, but instead of actually reading a straightforward textbook, you take each page, you chop it, and then you like put it in different spots in the book, and then you figure it out.
Give yourself a mental puzzle. That's what Dunkirk is.
Yep.
You need carbs!
May thy knife chip and shatter. There is beauty in imperfections.
You're great. I am.
And if you feel it,
Are you watching closely?
Is my lighting okay?
Yeah, it looks good. It's very
I think so.
atmospheric. I think honestly you probably have Seth has got the green screen, so he can do whatever, but you have a very...
What do you mean? I have a real room. It's completely real behind me. This is a real couch.
Yes.
I think I pointed the right way.
Wait a second. Hang on. That couch is fake?
The TV that's right there?
The one that's going from corner to corner,
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
That one, that's fake?
At least pushing on it. At least pushing on the fabric of time and space.
The ripples. She's the ghost. It's like that one joke or whatever, like, the fridge is a lie. You want to see what's behind the fridge? Nothing.
Nothing. It's just a cardboard cutout.
Oh my god.
Show us what's inside the fridge, Wayne. You want the truth?
Oh,
There is no fridge! I lied!
Wait, no.
That was good.
That fridge was there for like so many streams too. What's so funny is that joke was like waiting for like hours.
Yeah.
Hours and hours to be revealed. It's so funny.
Yeah, it's good.
my
Anyways,
word.
Will asked if Josh has the best like setup. I think he does because of the string lights. They're very aesthetic.
It's atmosphere.
Yeah, it's very atmospheric. I think it's the not the. It's kind of like the stock standard. Like, oh, this is a very nice background I have. Well, and
You have your baby teeth somewhere behind you.
no, I got rid of them specifically because of that. So if you look here, that is my. One of those is. Both of those are my graduation. What do you call them? I just forgot the word.
Diplomas?
Yeah, the diploma. There we go. That's my diploma for my for my PSEO college and my actual college where I got my majors.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
It's good.
I miss my bookshelf. I love my setup right now. I like the lighting better,
Yeah.
but having just a backdrop of a bookshelf is really, really cool.
yeah,
I miss that.
if I could, I would probably do a. One of these days, I'm gonna actually get a green screen probably, but I would like to. If I could, I would do a bookshelf too because I have a lot of books, and I could actually make myself seem cool by showing off all my old books and cool stuff.
I don't know how to read.
Josh, that was very Danny Gonzalez of you.
All right, we should probably get on to the
got me
stuff.
We should get on to the meat of the episode.
Yeah.
Dunkirk.
Dunkirk.
So, I'm going to preface this by talking about what we talked about when we were talking about this.
What did we talk about? We talked about not talking about it, actually.
Technically, yes. Not that we were going to forego it, but that this isn't that crazy of a movie. Obviously, it's more brain power to try and figure it out the first time you watched it. And then even my second time watching it, I still didn't enjoy it. Like, I was still putting the amount of brain power I was putting into it was not being overcome by my enjoyment of it, and that isn't fun for me. I don't know how many times you guys had watched it, but so this was your second, Josh?
Yeah.
And then Will, this was your first time.
Yep, I just watched it for this episode.
Okay, so I'm curious to hear what you thought, whether you knew the Nolan twist. You know, he has that twist, that moment.
Yeah.
Also, we didn't address that Zach's not here. He just got back from like a midnight trip to Tennessee, and he said he was very tired, and so we're going without him.
He's temporarily disowned.
He did not get kicked out of the Nolan Bros.
Temporarily disowned.
Only to be he will be readopted in the next episode.
Yeah. Readopted.
But that's kind of the point, is that he didn't care to miss out on this one. Like, that's not it's not the biggest one. I'm thinking about the other ones. Like, people don't really talk about Insomnia. That's kind of the one that gets lost in the middle, and I have not seen that one.
Me neither.
It's coming up soon. It has Robin Williams in it.
That's the only one I don't really know anything about either.
I am a huge fan of Robin Williams.
I'm curious to watch it because I don't know the twist. It might actually, from what I remember, it might be his most normal movie. But I don't know. We'll review that when we get there. But even this one is like, I forget that Christopher Nolan made it. Not because of the style, because the style is very Christopher Nolan-esque, but it's just, it falls behind, I guess. And that's why Zach didn't care to be on this episode. He didn't want to push his own insomnia and sleepless mentality to talk with us.
It's a good movie, but this is not a story I would have liked Christopher Nolan to try and do. Like historical, there's no aha moment unless you're Nate Bargatze and you're. Sorry, I just watched.
Was that referencing something?
It's referencing one of his comedy bits, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't know history." And you can tell because every history movie I watch on the edge of my seat. And that's the joke. It's like, yeah, when I watched Pearl Harbor, I was just as surprised as they were. That's the joke. But unless you're Nate Bargatze, you probably won't have as much of an aha moment for this. But yes, there's personal stories, like you have the sailors, and then you have like the sad scenes of what's his face hitting his head and like kind of the remorse there. But it's not a story I wanted to be Christopher Nolanized.
Well, it's interesting that we're talking about this after Oppenheimer, and technically like a year and a half after Oppenheimer. But that would have been his second historical adaptation. And that one I felt didn't land. I didn't enjoy Oppenheimer as much as I was expecting. It's just a lot of talking, and actually the problem with Dunkirk is the opposite. It's not enough talking. And I feel like the split, the three different storylines is more confusing to factual narrative, because like when you get it, you get it. I want Will to go next because you saw it for the first time. I don't know if you knew it beforehand, but having known the twist, like the one time that it explodes, or the plane explodes, I believe is the conjunction point. That made more sense when you saw the blue ship sinking before it actually sunk and all that. It just didn't hit, and I'm going to let Will have the stage now.
Okay. The first thing I'd say just about Oppenheimer is that's an interesting point. I think that actually that you don't really need a whole lot of talking for this one. I think that was fun. Again, like Josh said, it's a good film. I agree with that. But going into it the first time, I think you guys kind of poisoned me to being more disliking it because you said, oh, it's not as good a film. And I had that in the back of my head when I was watching this. So maybe that slightly altered my viewpoint of it, because I haven't watched it before and I expected it to be pretty good. And I think it's a good film, but I don't think that Nolan, like, I was kind of irritated throughout the entire time. I almost wanted to just shake Nolan by the neck and say, you don't have to do everything crazy time wobbly, buddy. Okay, you can you can chill. Just chill. Just no, please don't. like
deep breath, one timeline.
Yeah. Or here's also what I think would have just made it easier is you can tell different stories, and I think that actually that worked out pretty good for the most part. Like the idea behind that. Because then you can get different viewpoints and you can have more characters to engage with. But I think that he should have done it more chronological order, basically have like 3 different stories going at the same time. And like you can like jump around a little bit if you have to, but like then like
Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit.
yeah,
right?
where it's like you're following different people, but then eventually they intersect, and that through following them, because again like you like see like the plane, then you see like the pilot perspective, and then like you see the other perspective, and you're jumping across different time zones as well, and that makes it more confusing. That I don't think was as helpful. Compare this to like Oppenheimer, where I think that he's more able to get away with that because it's in a specific scenario where he's being interviewed and interrogated, and so you can kind of allow that a little bit more, and that works out a little bit better. But overall, I think what I did like though is he does. I mean, this is a very typical modern historical movie trope of like showing the horrors of World War II. I think he did a very good job with that. I did like a lot of the subtle nuances with a lot of the characters and like as you follow them. But I think it would have been nicer to have a bit more details on each of them. But again, you don't have to. And again, like it has good cinematography, good all of that. And the only thing is that I would agree it doesn't have as much of a hit, like an oomph. Like Oppenheimer, as much as like, you know, I felt it was long, the ending is very it's like a Nolan ending. It's a very like not a twist ending per se, but like that the vision of like Nolan, like it all coming together and him like seeing the vision of like what he's done. That is a very like cinematic ending. I don't really know the best way to describe it. It's not like a shock ending, but and that's I didn't quite get that same feeling for that. Like the way that Dunkirk ends is I thought almost great, but there's just like the final scene is just plane burning, darkness, guy face, end credits. I was like, what? Yeah. Like I would have expected him to like maybe say like usually what they have for historical movies is the those final credit lines where it says blah 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 1,000 people were saved and Dunkirk was an amazing miracle or blah 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 or something like that, kind of like they had at the beginning. And they didn't have that. So like, there's a couple things where I was like, what? So yeah, I think there's just a couple of. I think it's a good film, and a couple of alterations would have made it better. But I do appreciate the fact that he actually covered Dunkirk, which I don't really think is covered a lot because most people focus on D-Day or the actual event. This does a really good. This from a historical perspective does a really good job at showing like just like the brutality and the horror of it, but also not by being very explicit. It's just very somber, and it shows a very good impact on everyone, both the ordinary citizens and the people who are actually there, and how just like it's a very kind of almost small set. You've got the sea, you've got the beach, that's kind of it, but just how much tenseness there is in the air, and you can feel that. And I do like how it's all kind of brought together in the boat, and how all these characters, you finally see them come together. And just sorry, one more thing. It's an hour and a half, and I actually like that because it's like it's not 2 or 3 hours. I'm like, whew, I can get through this. I was like, wow, that's actually really short, and I think that worked out in its favor too. It's not like overbearingly long, even though it kind of felt a little long at certain points. But that's because you're following different perspectives, and they're able to tell a lot within a time frame that felt acceptable, in my opinion.
Yeah. I will say that like camera shots and everything cinematography wise, when they're focusing on the character, the actors also do a really, really good job at portraying like whether you're deceiving someone. Like when what's his name? The blonde guy who had the brother that died.
I don't know, dude. I'm sorry.
That's one thing about Nolan films is he really doesn't hold your hand for names at all.
No.
So pretty sure it was his brother. 90% sure. Probably going to get that wrong, but the blonde guy that had his brothers die and then he lied to the soldier that killed him, like that is one of my favorite scenes because like you have camera angles and stuff that make me think, oh, do you think he actually believes him, or is he just wanting to believe him so that he can feel better for now? And like they do a really, really good job at giving a lot of emotion for the very little dialogue that happens, or the very little kind of storytelling. Most of it's just action or them trying to fill bullet holes in a boat, or them fighting, or it's mostly action, but they do a great job at giving a lot of info in the very little dialogue, and I want to praise that because that's one thing I really liked.
A lot of show don't tell. which is
Yeah,
really
yeah.
down to the actors, I think. Especially like, for example, the French guy who we only know is French because he doesn't talk, and like that's only revealed later on.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
like one of my favorite scenes starting out was like when the main British soldier kid, we'll call him that, the one that the perspective that you're following for the on the ground perspective, like when like he's meeting the French guy for the first time, and like you just see a foot, and like you see that he's burying him, and you see that, oh, he's actually wearing that guy's shoes. Like you get all of that in an instant, and I think that's again a really good example of how you can use film greatly in comparison to other mediums, and how that film really excels in that. But
Oh, for sure.
but again, just even that's also kind of can lead into a critique that I sort of have, where while we're following British soldier guy, I kind of get lost in like, okay, so you know he makes it to the beach, and then he goes underneath this pier, and then somehow he's on a boat, and then the boat sinks, and then he's stranded on shore, stranded in the water. Then he washes up on the beach. Then he goes onto another boat that stranded on the beach as well with a bunch of other guys, and that boat goes out into shore, then it starts sinking, then he goes out into the ocean, and then the thing is on oil, then he gets grabbed by the one guy, and then he's in the other boat, and like that kind of got confusing for me a little bit, and that's again because of the different timed cut sequences, that it's just like what's going on here. Again, I think if he had done a bit more chronological, generally in order, and then just had it all tied together, it would have been better.
Yeah, I think this film succeeded because of Nolan just being a good director when it comes to making sure that like cinematics and stuff do really, really well. But I think his method of storytelling was not it for this story. And that's the conclusion that we've all kind of come to. Like, it's great. It's a great movie. I'd say it's a good movie. I don't want to give it the great title, but that's all it is, because it's the aha moment that most Nolan films have, like the aha moment for The Prestige or Inception or
Tenet,
Interstellar, like those that kind of give it replayability. This is one that I watched it once and I was satisfied with once, because I'm like, okay, I kind of got it figured out. It doesn't feel like there's a worthwhile reason for me to keep thinking about this. And on the second one, it only confirmed that. So I was having a hard time locking in, because it's like I kind of already know the story. Why do I have to work so hard to delve into it? That's why I'm not good at the names of it or anything like that.
So what I'm hearing you say is that I really forced you to watch this, and it was against your better judgment.
Yes. It was the last 30 minutes, and I'll admit, I put it on 2x speed.
Yeah.
And then I put Subway Surfers underneath it.
And then on your computer, you pulled up the Shrek GIF that plays the entire game, the entire movie of Shrek. This, I'm putting this up in case there are people who are wanting an explanation of how the Dunkirk timelines worked, but it kind of makes sense. It's one that you get, but you wish you would go back to watch it, but you don't really want to watch it again. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm going to say, I feel like I nailed that.
I hadn't seen that, and I wanted that, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to watch it. Like, you exactly described what I was feeling after seeing that. I wish I would have looked up a timeline, but I'm not smart enough for that.
Now you have to watch it a third time.
I think kind of like the difference between this and another Nolan film is that I think for this film, what I would have liked is somebody to say, this is going to be spoiler free, but here's some info that's going to make the watching better going into it. And I think that shows a weakness of the film. The other thing for this is that compare this to other Nolan films where he does have this twisty, weird what's going on, but it makes you want to rewatch it. And I think in this case, this makes you not want to rewatch it because it's, I think, unnecessarily complicated. And that's not a very good strong suit for most historical dramas, because it's a historical thing. You're trying to tell a story. You can do that in engaging ways, and there's different ways you can do that. And I think, again, using the different parallel stories is not a bad idea, but like specifically the different timeline thing, when people are like not going to be as interested per se, I don't think that works well in this medium, which is kind of rehashing what we're already saying.
I like what you said about like like having to go to stuff before watching the film and having it make better, because I think of Tenet specifically, where that movie was really, really good, and it was very enjoyable, and the aha moment was very, very catching, which made me want to watch it again. Whereas the aha moment for Dunkirk doesn't really give me that desire to watch it again. It's like, oh, okay, and then you just keep moving on. The reason Dunkirk suffers because you need to watch stuff beforehand to make it okay, not to make it better. Whereas like Tenet, it's great on its own, and watching stuff outside of the movie, like YouTube videos and examples and pictures of a timeline, is what emphasizes it.
Yeah.
Like just brings the best out of it, rather than just making it bearable like Dunkirk.
Yeah. Because when I go to watch a historical movie, most of the time I'm doing that to say what is this director trying to portray history. I'm not trying to let me try and figure out this time box mystery thing. Whereas like that's kind of Nolan's style. That's a good style for him, but I think specifically in this medium, the way it was used was not as good. Like compare this to, for example, to like 90% of every other historical drama. It's always like especially World War II, it's always like focusing on a single group that does a single thing that's in order. Like, you know, and that usually is done so for a specific reason because it works well. Again, like you can have little variability. I think Oppenheimer, in the way that it's done, is actually not too bad. It's just there's different things that kind of detracted from that film.
One thing that, as Josh was talking about, the memorability of the characters, not only were names difficult, but Ellie said that all of the soldiers looked the same.
Yeah.
They all had black hair.
I know, black hair and very neutral faces. The only one I noticed was Harry Styles, and barely because he's Harry Styles. But
Who's Harry? Or which one was Harry Styles?
He was the guy who was threatening to kick the Frenchman out of the boat.
The soldier.
Yeah.
I mean, you could argue in some sense that's kind of portraying like everyone. That's how they almost all looked or whatever. I think you could maybe make an artistic argument for that. I felt for the most part, I was able to follow the specific characters, at least because we have Cillian Murphy, who's Cillian Murphy, which, by the way, whenever we do our Nolanverse timeline, it's going to be really weird because there's so many actors that are in the same,
I know,
like in different Nolan films. So like that's a different rabbit hole. But I was like, wait, we have Bane here? What's going on? We have the Scarecrow? What?
When we do the Nolanverse episode, we are going to ignore name changes and timelines because you can't really work with those really well. So we're just going to do faces and saying that they moved on to, like, this sailor guy had PTSD, so he moved to Gotham and studied PhD in psychology and theater and all that stuff. So I'm looking forward to that. I found a website that I feel I would really like. History versus Hollywood, which I feel like they missed out on calling it real versus real. REAL versus REEL. Yeah. Anyways, there's most popular historical movies here. And they ask questions, say, did this really happen? Did this really happen? What's interesting is that almost everything actually happened. At least the general consensus of the historical account. Farrier, the Air Force pilot played by Tom Hardy, was pretty much the only real character, the only real person that they adapted. Everyone else was either a personification of like the Englishmen driving their boats. Like they had to follow somebody, so they made up a fictional character. There's no one guy that they had to single out. So the kid who died, I don't believe actually happened. As a specific person. The other one was the general, was based off of somebody, but not the actual name. But most of the facts of what happened were real. So I think that it's cool that he did stick to a very specific and accurate view of the story. But like Will said, I don't think that it helped. I don't think it really did much to do that. Like it's an amazing story, but it's not an awe-inspiring story.
Well, I think it's
cool
more
to learn about, but
I'd rather read about it in a history book.
Well, actually, I almost disagree because, again, I am thankful that he's covering Dunkirk because it doesn't really get covered a lot. And as somebody who has a very big passion for history, Dunkirk, I think, is...
Degree in history.
I do, as a matter of fact. so I get to throw that around every now and then. So
That's his thing. We do historical films with this guy.
yeah. So I can throw my weight around in this one and kind of tell you what's what. But Dunkirk, I think, to my knowledge, like, it does a pretty good job of like being historically accurate, which I very much appreciate. And I think that this shows that you can do a really good film. Again, maybe not a great film, but it's like a solid film that's historically accurate. And he does that by again personifying people, by focusing on, I'm telling the story of what happened. Like this is true. Like, there are these soldiers who are essentially trapped here at Dunkirk, and they're getting surrounded, and like, you can see the fear and the tension, and they're trying to get home. And that's the big theme throughout the movie, is that it's so close, but we can't quite get there. And then you have like this turnaround where ordinary citizens pull out and they come in droves, and they're a big part of the reason that hundreds of thousands of soldiers were able to escape from Dunkirk almost miraculously and make it to Britain. And that is like a compelling story. And I think that overall he does a good job of actually showing that. But it also doesn't have the same emotional impact as like Hacksaw Ridge, for example, is able to deliver. But it's historically accurate, which is, I think, praiseworthy, and that's especially because there's a lot of films, especially recently, that have not been able to deliver in such a manner. And he does a good job of what a historical film, in my opinion, is supposed to do, which is present the story as accurately as you can of what the past is like, but make it palpable for the present audience. So in other words, you have to take people who are in the present and make them understand, this is what it felt like. This is what people were going through. This is this is the story of what happened in this specific instance. And through the medium of film, its greatest strength is making you feel a connection towards that. So like when you're seeing this one guy, when you're following this one guy who just wants to get home, and he keeps on going, he keeps on sinking, and these people keep dying around him, like you can feel that, you latch onto that better than if you're going to read a history book. And that's the great strength of a film. And I think for the most part, this film is able to mostly deliver on kind of that emotional impact. It doesn't fully, in my opinion. Again, like Hacksaw Ridge is an amazing film that does a really good job in showing you the horrors and the drama and all that. There's a lot of other good films like that, and this is a fine, solid film for in regards to history. But I think it let me rephrase that. I think this is a fine, solid film that is able to, for the most part, get you kind of emotionally invested and able to make you think about, this is actually happened. This is what people went through. And I always feel that whenever I see people like on the ships drowning, like, because I was watching it with my parents, and like you just think about like, like going through that, and you imagine that, and that's what you're not going to get by just reading a text. Or when there's oil and people are either stuck between like, okay, either I'm going to drown or I'm going to burn, and there's no good option. And that's what people live through. That's what people went through. And that's the power of film, is being able to make you actually have a connection to the people in the past who went through that, and understand this is what people went through to get me to the present.
Yeah,
That was bars.
Yeah, there's my rant.
There's a lot of bars. Had like 2 verses right there. I loved it. That was really, really good. I didn't think about that. At first I was thinking, man, I'd rather have this simplified, but you are right. And like, he did a really good job at portraying each personal like part of the story, which made me think, oh, this is more than just history. This is like people dying over this. This is like the heartaches that they went through, even though this isn't the picture perfect like heartache that each soldier went through, because this isn't exactly accurate, but this is a good idea of like what actually happened. Or I can use this to relate and feel some remorse for that battle.
Yep.
Even though I may have a really hard time understanding what happened on Dunkirk, I at least know it was difficult.
Yeah.
And it was emotional.
Well, yeah, and again, like there's a thing between like too nitpicky, where it's like, oh, this isn't accurate, or this person isn't real. Like, yes, that's true. But as long as, again, it's mostly accurate to the best ability that you can be. But the main power is that you don't have to be so accurate that it's obnoxious, that you can actually have a connection to people who are made up, but who really personify what's more real. They symbolize the struggle, or the heartache, or the persistence and the things that these people were going through. So yeah, that's what I really like about this film, and most good historical films, if they're done right.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the heart that is hidden in every Nolan film. Sometimes it's a little more at the front, like I would say Interstellar. almost makes me cry every time.
Yeah.
I would say that Dunkirk has a little bit of heart. The relationship between Cillian Murphy and
George. I think it's Georgie.
George of the Jungle.
Because I think it's Georgie.
The two kids.
Yeah,
Two kiddos.
Barry Keoghan. I remember Zach and I talked about how to pronounce his name a while ago, and I still don't
Bless
get it
you.
right. But George, yes. And what did Cillian Murphy play? Or what? I don't know. We know his name.
He's just Cillian Murphy to me. That's literally what he is.
Shivering. He's the shivering soldier. Yeah. Well, actually, this makes a good point. A lot of these characters on here are just names, as in, sorry, not names, titles.
Yeah.
So I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 names, maybe 8, out of like a list of multiple people who had like their face in the lens quite a bit. So
I mean,
the fact that they didn't give a lot of them names is interesting.
that's a Nolan thing too. Tenet's protagonist was called Protagonist.
Yeah.
Well, and that's
so-
because like it doesn't really matter so much the name as long as you can recognize them. Because like we know who Cillian Murphy is. We know,
Which you can't do because they all have black hair and look like a teenager.
well, that's
Yeah.
because they were.
But anyways, back to the heart with Cillian Murphy and George.
Well, it wasn't George specifically. It was, I gotta look up the other guy's name.
I think it was Mr. Jack or Jackie or whatever.
Mr. Dawson.
Oh,
Is it Tommy? Fionn Whitehead? That's an unfortunate last name. I think it's Tommy, who was the other kid who, my point is that after George died and Cillian Murphy, the shivering soldier, asks, is he okay? That character growth of that character, the boy, is to say, yeah, he's fine, to avoid more conflict, to know what this soldier's gone through. That's what Mr. Dawson was talking about, is like, hey, he's gone through a lot. Go easy on him. So
That was my favorite scene from the whole thing. Like that was really well shot, and that was a lot of heart, and I really liked that scene.
yeah. The other thing that I like too, because that's a very personal one, because we follow this boat, and the boat is like the linchpin of sorts, where it all comes together with the pilot who crashes, and he's brought up there, and then the other British soldier kid who's rescued from the oil and it's like literally dragged away. But I also really liked I really like Tom Hardy's pilot character, and the kind of the last scene where he's like out of gas, and then like you hear like the airplane, the German airplane, and like he destroys it, and then like you just see him like coasting, and I really love that last sequence where he's just, there's so much emotion that professional actors are able to convey, and so much that they're able to tell with just a couple of looks that I really respect and appreciate. And near the end, like you just get a lot of those very like, there's just so much conveyed with so little speaking that I really just appreciate and love that. And like, when he's like burning his ship and like he's just sitting there, he's just looking off, and when he's flying and he's landing, all of that I just really love how that's done.
what else is there? Like, honestly, we're at 34 minutes and we're done. Like, I feel like there's got to be at least one more thing.
The boats are cool. The guy who plays the commanding officer was a good one. The scene where everyone shows up and it's like, oh, I see you home, and it's because it's all the people are there. It's like that's pretty good. That's okay. One last thing I really do like, the score, and I knew it because I have recognized the score before because I've watched a what's it called? Not a music video, but like it's really like it's a mashup of clips between Darkest Hour, another film that's kind of set in the same time.
Just watched that recently, and it was really, really good.
Yeah, so I saw like it was like a YouTube video which is like a couple minutes long, which is like it has scenes from Dunkirk and from Darkest Hour, and the way that it was spliced together, I thought was really good. And that's the other thing I can give credit for, is that this has amazing scenes. Like if you take them out of context, I think they almost work better sometimes because you can imagine so much more about what's going on. But just the score is really good, and I got to give credit to that because it's a very somber film. It's not very like loud as often, but when it is, like you can really hear it, and I love that score for the film. It's really good.
Yeah.
I believe this is one where if you listen to the music or the metronome sound that was in there, that depending on which one you were watching, which timeline, it was either ticking fast or regular or slow. Not necessarily like Inception was, where each tick actually resonated, or each sound of the music resonated throughout the layers of the dream, but just to signify like the I don't know which way it would be, but one of them would be ticking really fast, just the background tick 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 tick. One would be tick tick tick, and then the other one would be tick tick. I feel like I recognize that. I couldn't tell you exactly how they pulled that off, but I believe that was Hans Zimmer. So yeah, it was Hans Zimmer, of course. The funny thing that I've noticed is that Nolan has moved from Hans Zimmer to Ludwig Göransson. He started off with Tenet, and then he did Oppenheimer, and now he's going to be doing the Odyssey movie that's coming out next.
Oh, I'm so excited!
And it's just like he forgot all about Hans Zimmer when he found out a different quirky guy to do his music for him. So
yeah, Odyssey is going to be interesting when he does that one. I have a suspicion for, I think, how he's going to do it. We've kind of talked about it on our Discord, which you should join, by the way. But yeah, again, Nolan has a very specific style, and that's great, but it doesn't work for everything. And I think that's the biggest takeaway we can take from this film is that, again, it's a good film. He's a good director. And I think we've said it before on a really early podcast that he constantly produces good work. But it's not all equal, and that's partly because that's just, being a director, you don't always produce the same quality of same worth. But also, like, his style is just he loves weird timey-wimey stuff, and like, okay, that's great, but maybe not for everything, buddy. Just like I think we've also said it before, like the most streamlined of his films is probably the Dark Knight trilogy, where it's like chronological for like the most part, but otherwise, he always does like his special little twist, and most of the time that works well. But I think in this specific instance, it's not as powerful and as useful a tool in this type of telling of a historical drama for this type of what he's trying to do here.
Yeah, I agree. It just doesn't work, and that's okay. If you wanted, actually, this is really weird to think about. If you wanted the factual story, but instead of actually reading straightforward textbook, you take each page, you chop it, and then you like put it in different spots in the book, and then you figure it out.
Give yourself a mental puzzle. That's what Dunkirk is.
Yep. Excuse me. Yeah, that's all I got. It's a pretty simple movie. No, I shouldn't say that. It's a pretty short movie. Very complex. It'll give your brain a workout. Again, this is one that I would not say you have to see. You could go without seeing Dunkirk, and you'd probably be fine. You could even read about it instead. But I don't know. Yeah. It makes an easy episode for this week, and now we're done in like 40 minutes.
Yeah, I would say that this is, again, because of my history bias, I do like it a bit more because of its use in like reaching audiences and having more of an impact. So I would recommend it for that. But I think that this is the type of film where it's a one shot, how do you feel type of film, where you watch it once, you watch it once. There we
Sound
go.
It out.
I English, yes. I think it's the type of film where you watch it once and then you just see, how do I feel about this? I think it's you can be one and done, but for some people, I think it is also, maybe I actually want to watch it again and maybe a bit more. I just think it's a type of film that you should probably just watch because I think it's good enough that you're not going to be, I don't think, disappointed. Maybe if you're like having high expectations, just have like let's just see what this is going to be like and how I feel about it. I think that's the type of film this is. Maybe not a rewatchable one, but I think I would kind of recommend just watching it once to see how you feel about it. And then, if it's great, it's great. If it's kind of meh, then it's meh to you.
And if you want to watch it in 2x speed, don't feel guilty.
I wonder if there are Dunkirk stans like that. The Dunkirk is their favorite movie of Christopher Nolan's.
The two of you we're offending. I'm sorry.
I'm not, but what we've said is what we've said. So I don't really mind leaving it at that. So thank you guys for taking the time to do this.
Of course, not much